Faces of Stone is not live. We are not live tonight. This is our first pre-recorded show, although we intend to conduct ourselves just as we do when we are live. What's going on? Google Hangouts, as some of you may know, has discontinued its broadcast to YouTube feature, which we and many other web talkers have been using. When Google does things like this, I don't know, sometimes I think I may just have to sign away my likeness and all my personal information to some competitor of Google's. Anyway, we're doing what we can to get a show in the can for you tonight. Hopefully 2 weeks from now, we will have figured out a way to do this live once again. If you're thinking that this live to tape episode of Faces of Stone will not have the usual carefully researched and arduously prepared erudition you expect from us, you are absolutely correct. So let's begin by meeting the Faces of Stone panel, as always. I am joined first from Champaign-Urbana, an outer rim territory if ever there was one, Mr. Marc-Anthony Macon.
Hey everyone, great to be back.
And from Washington Heights, an outer rim territory, if ever there was one, in the city of New York, the beautiful Amanda Sisk.
Hello, hello. It's nice to be here, not live.
And I am Noah Diamond. Well, this is one of our special theme episodes. Last time we discussed Solo in our episodic discussion of the films in episodic order. And 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be talking about Rogue One. Well, we thoughtfully gave ourselves a little break in between the two Star Wars stories to touch on a couple of smaller Star Wars stories, talk about things that don't merit entire episode-length discussions on their own, but nevertheless might be good to kick around a little bit. So we've got a few major topics, and those are going to be followed at the end of this episode by a sort of lightning round. I shouldn't even say that, but an abbreviated round in which we will...
A force lightning round.
A force lightning round in which we will ask each other questions. We will rank the Star Wars films in order of preference and things like that. Anybody want to say anything else before we launch this ship?
As always, I will be...
Anything else?
I'll be playing bingo. So, buzzword bingo. So if you hear this noise, it means that somebody has hit the bingo, and I'll show you what it is.
And what this really means is that Sisk knows us well enough to predict things we say over and over again.
Or you're just predictable.
Well, that's my way was a nicer way of putting that, but sure.
All right, so Noah Diamond, why don't you get us started?
Well, one thing that we've touched on occasionally in some of our other conversations, especially when we talk about what Star Wars means to us personally or what our personal experiences with it have been. But it does merit some discussion by itself because it's been such a part of our experience of it, and that is the world of Star Wars toys. I think partly because we all got to know and love Star Wars when we were children. We were pretty much the audience, the intended audience for the movie, but we were definitely the intended audience for the toys. I see thoughts percolating in the mind of Marc-Anthony Macon.
Well, I mean, I think that, first of all, it's, really kind of a stroke of genius that when Lucas was, initially getting all the licensing deals and things for Star Wars, he took a huge cut in terms of what sort of revenue he would get for film distribution in deference to having all the rights to the merchandising. And, I mean, if nothing else, that was a great business deal. I mean, I think he's made most of his fortune from selling, 3-inch pieces of plastic. So that was certainly smart there. But also I think that, especially considering in the 70s and 80s, there really wasn't any home video, at least until, mid-80s, most families didn't have home video. And so without being able to revisit the movies anytime you wanted, maybe they would show up on TV here and there. You had to make your own Star Wars movies with what you had, and that was generally your Star Wars toys. And so it was a way that you could continue enjoying Star Wars in a very personal way. And And also, I'm materialistic, so I just liked having having the toys.
It's funny you mention that, because I feel like most of the way I feel about things as a person, I should sort of be repulsed by the vast merchandising empire part of Star Wars. Because in almost every other context, I'm always pretty grumpy about a world that's always trying to get you to buy things, and everything is really just a commercial for something else, you know? Mm-hmm. However, because I was a child when Star Wars happened, because I was so in love with Star Wars, I have to admit, I mean, it was very important to me when I was a child, to the fact that I could own Star Wars action figures and Muppet puppets, you know, and it wasn't it wasn't an acquisitive sense of like, oh, I must have everything. It was more a matter of, these were the creative tools to, as you put it, like, continue the adventures. Those Muppet puppets were practically like a circle of friends to me, you know. I mean, those were the early casts in my early productions, and Star Wars figures too. I mean, you learn so much about how to tell stories and be creative by making up little scenes for your toys. So it's hard for me to be as cynical about this as I might naturally want to be.
Well, and I think also because, you know, a lot of toys at the time, you know, were sold by half-hour commercials. Even I certainly collected the He-Man and Masters of the Universe things, but those toys, the cartoon was clearly just designed to sell those toys, and, you know, had a very thin narrative at best. It's like, what kind of MacGuffin can Skeletor be after this week? So, you know, it's easier to be cynical about that, because maybe I wouldn't have really wanted those toys were it not for these commercials that I was being fed. But the Star Wars films were certainly not commercials for the toys. The toys were, you know, an accessory to enjoyment of those films.
It's so true. It would not be a fair critique of Star Wars to say it's a commercial for the toys. Whereas it's certainly true that in the same time period, we were sold an awful lot of entertainment that, but, you know, children are discriminating audiences, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
It's just a different set of standards.
I never really had a lot of store-bought toys, I guess, when I was younger, and I never had Star Wars toys. And my neighbor had the Millennium Falcon, and I was just obsessed with the damn thing. Just obsessed with it. I loved it, and you could open the little thing, and it was amazing. Like, it was just wonderful.
It was huge, that Kenner Falcon. I didn't have it either, but it was a big.
No, but in an ottoman right behind Noah Diamond right now is the smaller Millennium Falcon. It's in that box behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I have that original 77 one on top of my TV stand.
That's what I wanted, so I just wanted to play with it so bad, and he wanted to play with it, so he's like, no, you can't play with it.
Well, and you know, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Paul got me Darth Maul, and he was really badly put together, so I only have his lightsaber now.
Mm-hmm.
And then Noah got me Kylo Ren. So
Aww.
His lightsaber was really poorly made, so it broke, or maybe I broke it. And so these two live together, and these are my Star Wars toys.
Oh, I thought for just a second you had just broken that lightsaber and was like, oh man!
I dropped it. I don't know if it's
okay. But I just wanted, like, going back to the Millennium Falcon and other, you know, Star Wars toys like that, I think something, I might be reaching here because it's not like I know the history of toys, but it seems to me that it was rare you would have toys in an action kind of genre that had accessibility like that. Like, you know, it was basically, the Millennium Falcon was a dollhouse. You know, it really was a dollhouse that you could put your dolls in, and they could have little parties and whatever. Typically, you wouldn't have something like that for an action-oriented toy line. It would usually just be maybe, you know, some kind of vehicle that the cockpit would open for the character, but you wouldn't have a whole scene you could set. And that was what was, you know, really wonderful. You could go inside of the Falcon.
We also have a box of toys in this closet right next to me that were Noah Diamonds from childhood, and you can see two behind him.
Yeah, R2 and 3PO are back there. I mean, I really don't have much, and I didn't have much, but I have a small handful of what's left. This is a 1977 Stormtrooper. But, you know, I think that what was revolutionary about Star Wars toys when they were new was the idea of merchandising tie-ins with a movie. I mean, I think there had been little phenomena like Davy Crockett coonskin caps, you know, and Lone Ranger masks, but it really was a new world. And I think you're absolutely right from what I've read, Marc-Anthony, that Lucas, even having the fact that it was important to him to retain merchandising rights, I think the studio was more or less like, sure.
Yeah, I think they thought they were getting a great deal out of this.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that, you know, what hadn't been thought through on their part is this, you know, like, for example, you know, Davy Crockett or these other kind of franchises that, you know, would have sellability for a certain number of toys. It's still, you know, you're just going to have Davy Crockett and maybe a sidekick or two of his. Whereas, you know, just in New Hope alone, there were 6,000 characters. You know, you could make toys that, you know, if a completist kid needed them all, he was going to go into debt.
Can we talk about the size and quality really fast? Hold up that Stormtrooper again.
Yeah, okay.
So this is, yeah, like mine's tiny and it's falling apart. And yours has lasted since 77 and it's huge.
Well, I think they're similar dimensions. Ooh, it's really big now.
The same size. Here, look how it looks next to my face. Anyway, the quality of this is not good. Not good. That's all I'm saying. Have you noticed that, Marc-Anthony? Do you buy?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there was something sturdier about, you know, the older Star Wars figures, but they were also stiffer. You know, I mean, if you compare the poses of those two figures.
Yeah.
Kylo has a little more character to the way that, you know, it looks more like how a real person stands, whereas, you know, it's almost impossible to stand the way that Stormtrooper does, especially in that armor.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's a Stormtrooper makes the stiffness somewhat acceptable.
Right, and also I'm sure there's a word for this, but that Stormtrooper is exhibiting the classic plastic toy discoloration.
Yes.
And apparently there's some kind of chemical that if you bathe toys in that, it will restore that original color.
No, really? The back is not nearly so affected.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was sun damage or something.
I shouldn't think the sun definitely adds to it, yeah.
But, you know, the original Star Wars toys, I mean, it was, I had a handful of action figures and a couple of, like I had, the AT-AT was the coolest thing I had. Mm-hmm. But I remember as a child just spending time with them, even though if I didn't own them, was exciting. Like anytime we went to the mall, you know, my mother would have to go shopping or something, and I would just go to the toy store and just go to the section of the store where the Star Wars figures were and look at them. Maybe once in a while, you know, my mother would say, you can get one. And that would be very exciting. But just looking at them. And I had friends who had, you know, vaster collections than I did, and it sounds terrible.
I didn't realize.
Oh yeah, that was a bingo.
Sorry,
I when I was a very little child, I had a problem sucking my thumb. I sucked my thumb a little older than you really should.
Yeah, I don't know. You were still sucking your thumb when we met.
No.
99, was it 98 or 99?
No.
I'm glad you got over that.
At 21, no. But at 6, I probably was still sucking my thumb. And so my mother told me, as an incentive to get me to stop doing it, if I could go 2 weeks without sucking my thumb, I could get any Star Wars toy I wanted. So that was very exciting. And the Star Wars toy at that moment that I really wanted was the Slave One, Boba Fett's spaceship. Mm-hmm. So my mother had this idea that if I wore a little thing around my wrist, a little bracelet, that would remind me that when I lifted my hand up to suck my thumb, I would see it and I would think, oh no, I want to get my Star Wars toy. So I'm not going to do this. So as a 6-year-old boy, I briefly wore a bracelet that said Slave One on
it. And sometimes I still make him wear it.
I think I have my earbuds in the wrong ear. There we go.
Oh my God. Were you all like vertigo?
Yeah, no, it was very confusing and yeah, discombobulated, but now I'm fine.
I'm glad, Marc-Anthony, that you mentioned our earliest encounters with each other, because although I will refute any story that suggests I was sucking my thumb at the time, when I met you, like the first times I visited your home when you lived in New York, one thing that one realized as soon upon entering your home is that you had a lot of Star Wars toys.
Yes.
Beautifully arranged with a museum curator's care.
Not just Star Wars toys, by the way, everyone. I want everyone to understand that this man has so many toys, and they're so well cared for, and they're so well styled. But do not walk into his house and think that you're shaking up a snow globe, because you are shaking up his sea monkeys.
Oh yeah,
monkey. It was like I can still see it in slow motion. It was so great. So like for those of you that weren't there, this was basically the first time that Amanda was meeting me, or at least the first time you were at my place.
No, I think it was the first time we met.
I think it was the first time we met, and so I had these sea monkeys that, and if you've had sea monkeys, you know that they're very hard to keep alive, and usually like after a couple of weeks, you've killed them off somehow. But I had kept these alive, and especially one that just kept getting you could see him from a distance, and I was like, George, I named him after George Lucas. And so Amanda comes in and she sees this, and you thought it was one of those like, water flow toys or a snow globe or something. Yeah. And so she picked it up to shake it, and it just has this loose lid. And so the water just flies out, and I just remember her face going from delight to horror in a nanosecond in this, no! It was beautiful. Yeah. It was also the best possible way we could have met. So thank you for killing my mail order aquatic pets.
Lucas.
Yes.
But I will say this man has toys, amazing collection of toys. And what I would like to see right now, did you bring out any toys, interesting toys for us to look at tonight?
I did not plan. I meant to do that. I didn't plan in time, but some of the toys are just right here. So give me a second to step off camera, and I'll grab some of my stuff.
While Marc-Anthony goes to get his toys, we'll have a little intermission music. Da, 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 da.
Incremental penguin, son of a bitch.
Incremental penguin. Oh, look, it's Marc-Anthony.
He's gonna show us his toys for girls and for boys.
Okay, so
he goes, it's Marc-Anthony.
This is really one of my favorites ever. The Ewok Village is. This was just the playset of playsets, and I feel like one of the reasons that I love toys, and especially Star Wars toys, is really an aesthetic reason. It's like it's like this little sculpture. It's an art object, and I especially liked the design of. I love the design of the Ewoks in the movies, but for some reason the toys, the figures of the Ewoks were especially satisfying, and so being able to place them all. In this village thing was just always a lot of fun. And I would put little Christmas lights in, so there would be lights coming out of their rooms and all of that. And I really dug that. Also, I've got these collector's cases that, would hold. This one, I guess, is empty, but I think I've got some. Yeah, so this 3PO still has figures in it. So this is the C-3PO collector's case. And I have, here is my Anakin Skywalker ghost. So this is, when he was not Hayden Christensen, he was Shaw, Patrick, I think the guy's name is Shaw that played him.
I read it today, I can't remember.
Also, man, now this was, also, Star Wars toys were kind of my introduction to having an aesthetic opinion. Because I remember... when I finally got my Han Solo figure, I was like, who is this doofus? Look at that. This is such terrible construction of molding that looks, not only does it look nothing like Harrison Ford, it doesn't really look like anyone. And of course, Chewie is a classic.
Love Chewie.
I was a big fan of the Ugnaughts.
Who?
Ah,
So these were the little helpers that Lando employed on Cloud City.
Did you know these, Noah? Did you know of these?
I didn't know that they were called that, but I.
Okay. Not all of the pieces are here right now. I've got them somewhere, but here's Princess Leia in the Bouche disguise.
Oh yeah, I had that one. She had a helmet, a little orange rubbery helmet.
And I remember this being a really sought-after figure when it first came out. I think people had a hard time finding that one at first. Let's see if so. Okay, yeah, Kenobi here.
With that vinyl cape.
And you know, there's always this issue because here you see the lightsaber has a thing coming out of it already, and then you push the little thing out and it comes out.
Yeah.
And there was always a debate amongst people whether you were supposed to pull that off, if it was just like part of the molding they didn't take off, or if it was supposed to stay there. And I was on the side of it's supposed to stay there, but whoever owned this Luke before me did not agree, and they took it off.
Oh, yeah.
I disagree with you, Marc-Anthony.
You do?
Yes.
You think that thing should have been removed?
Yes.
Well, I did feel like it looked bad, and I thought there was a chance it should be removed, but to me it was losing a piece to my figure, and that was unacceptable.
I understand that.
So
it always left something to be desired, the way those lightsabers worked on those toys. And the vinyl capes, too, after that generation of toys. Yeah.
There's Lando. And, you know, like, this is not a great, facial sculpt, but it's not as bad as that Han.
None of them are, but...
Yeah, it's at least kind of sort of looks like Billy D. Now we got the updated Solo. This is the Empire Strikes Back Solo, who
yes
is a little bit. He's kind of chonk. I mean,
it's a little better.
Face is filled out a bit. I don't think Harrison ever quite got to that chub. Yeah, that's basic. I've got a bunch more in here. Here's the original Vader. And
hold him up in front of your face. Yeah, or like, wait, let me see him. That's weird looking.
I have that Vader, but he doesn't have his cape anymore.
Interesting.
And then Boba Fett, and now there was controversy because originally, before Empire Strikes Back came out, you could order Boba Fett through mail order.
Right.
And in the description when you ordered him, it said that he was going to have a working rocket launcher, and he did not. He arrived without that. He has the rocket there, but it doesn't shoot anything. And then, of course, people were seeking forever some of the original ones they made that did have the working rocket launcher, and there weren't many of those, I think. But I do believe they exist.
When the first Christmas came around after Star Wars had been released, famously, Kenner didn't have action figures ready, and they sold an empty box.
Right.
Did you have the empty box?
Yeah, I have that.
Yeah, do you?
I don't have the empty box anymore, but what it came with was this little, two little stands that had the names of all of the figures on there, and then whatever the little pegs are called to, squeeze their feet on. And it has little levers on the side that swivels them side to side so that they can have lightsaber battles together. So I do have that somewhere, or at least I did at some point. I'm not sure if I still do.
In a way, that seems as visionary a decision as any of this. Like, we're actually going to sell kids an empty box which entitles them to the toys when we have them ready.
Eventually. You'll get them someday. But, I guess that does show that by the time... the movie had been released, they knew that they had a cash cow on their hands, and they were, ready to pump that out there. I think that from what I understood from watching the Toys That Made Us, they didn't really know that they were getting such a sweet deal when they signed on for it. And then when the movie was just such a huge hit, they were like, oh, well then, let's make us some money.
So when episode 1 came out, so now there's a new generation of Star Wars movies coming along, and episode 1 came out just a couple of years after I moved to New York. It came along fairly early on in my friendship with you, Marc-Anthony. So now, for the first time, there are Star Wars movies coming out, and I'm an adult, an independent human being who can spend what little money he has however he wants. And I realized, oh my goodness, there's going to be new Star Wars toys. And wow, I don't have to ask anybody else for them. I don't have to beg my mother for them. I don't have to wait for my birthday to get one. I could take my entire paycheck and go spend it on Star Wars toys if I want to. And I did. I went to FAO Schwartz. I remember going there with you more than once that summer. And I bought all these Star Wars toys. I was like, this is so much fun. Look at this. I have an Anakin. I have a Yoda. And I bought them and I brought them home. And I suddenly realized, I don't want these. I don't have anything to do with these anymore. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to get them. But
well, you should have given them to me, is what it comes down to. If you were, done with them,
You want them? I do. I still have.
They're right here.
Yeah, that box that Amanda's talking about. It has maybe 10 action figures from my childhood, and all the rest is episode 1 stuff that I bought in '98. Some of it unopened, and I set it all up on my shelf, and I just thought, like,
it's close enough.
Packaging.
Close enough.
So that was a bit of it felt a little sad for me. Oh, I'm not getting the joy out of these that I did when I was a child. But
right.
Like today, I could still get a lot of joy out of going through your collection, Marc-Anthony, and looking at all the original generation stuff. That stuff, like, touches my heart. Are you still buying Star Wars toys? Like,
I mean, generally, I would say no is the answer to that for the most part. However, every now and then when I have a little bit of extra money and I just kind of want to delight myself, I will order either a Smurf, because there are infinite Smurfs now, or I will get an astromech droid.
Oh, that's nice.
I have a shelf in the living room that is all just, variants of R2 units. And I've kind of like, because the thing about collecting toys at all, but especially Star Wars toys, is you either go broke doing it or you can't have them all. And I'm so much of a completist that it almost doesn't make sense unless I can have them all. And even if I could afford that, I don't have space to display them all. So this is kind of the compromise I made, is like, well, I really just aesthetically love the way that those droids look. So and there's so many variations of them. They're nice to display together. So that's kind of where I've gone with it.
That's nice. That is a really good compromise.
I did collect Smurfs when I was younger. That was the one toy that my mom always got me. I got a lot of Smurfs. And oh my goodness, everyone, I'm just going to plug Zoom here. Usually they give you a 40-minute time on your meetings when you don't pay their fee. But for our first meeting, they're going to give us unlimited minutes. So here we are.
Hey!
Thank you very much, Zoom.
So
we can get this all in one shot. If
yeah,
only
that's nice.
Let us broadcast to YouTube, we'd have our solution.
Yeah.
If anyone out there knows of any good solutions, by the way, please let us know in comments, because between now and our next episode, we're going to be looking into ways to broadcast live while recording for YouTube.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I don't know what this recording is going to look like. I don't know if it's going to have my mouse running around or anything. Sorry. We did our best.
We know you have come to expect high quality from Faces of Stone, but
I am the tech person here, so you should expect very little.
While we're talking about the toys, briefly, I just want to add the really, much anticipated and weirdly executed mid-90s line of Star Wars toys.
Power of the Force?
Yes. And I mean, it could not have been better titled, because all the characters were just awkwardly powered up. I mean,
really jacked up.
I think the first one I ever saw was Lando, and I just remember like staring at that figure, for like 5 minutes, just being like, why? Why did they give Lando these pecs? He used to be super sexy, and now he just looks like, a big old gym rat meathead.
It's true, though that line of figures is kind of infamously bulked up for some reason, way beyond the way any of them look in the movies.
It's a strange decision. I mean, I guess the best explanation I can think of is that, some executive or three decided that since Star Wars wasn't necessarily popular at the time, they needed to attract kids otherwise, and that was by, showing them these powerful characters that they would want to. And, it is understood, I guess, that one of the reasons He-Man was so popular was just like repetition of the word power, because little boys love power.
Yeah, and the muscles of those characters and superheroes are always muscular. I mean, I suppose it's making them a little more superheroic. It's maybe notable that the Marvel Star Wars comic did the same thing.
That's true, yeah.
Made all the characters look like a lot more buff than they were.
But I mean, in that situation, I think it was less about trying to have a display of power and more about most of the people that drew comics at the time were just coming from life drawing classes where it's like you didn't know how to draw a human being unless you were thinking about their musculature.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it was really, that's the same reason superheroes have tights. It's like, we can't draw clothes. This isn't something we know how to do.
If it was me, they would all have bodies but no hands and feet. That was me in life drawing. I would stop at the wrists and ankles because so.
Well,
at least we had them, the people who could do hands and feet.
Yes.
My earliest Star Wars memory concerns a Star Wars action figure. And because I know this, I could not have been younger than 6 when this happened, because it involves very specifically a Return of the Jedi action figure. I know that I had many Star Wars experiences before this, but the earliest specific memory I can think of is I'm 6 years old. I'm playing with my Star Wars figures in the bathtub. And I had a Lando Calrissian figure. It was Lando in Jabba's palace, in his bounty hunter disguise.
Mm-hmm.
Later seen in Solo, a Star Wars story.
Yes.
So it's Lando in that costume. And I had him, he didn't have his helmet on. And I don't know, I was making the figures act out some story where they were really up against a formidable villain who stuck Lando's head in the drain of the bathtub. The bathtub had a little drain, like if the water gets to a certain level, it'll drain out. And it was a little round opening, just about the size of an action figure's head. So one of the villains, I'm going to guess it was Darth Vader, but I don't really remember the story details, stuck Lando's head in there. And of course, when I tried to pull it out, it came out without the head. And I still remember the way it sounded. I heard Lando's plastic head hit like a metal surface somewhere in there. And I sat there, a naked 6-year-old boy with a decapitated Lando figure, sort of horrified. And I had to explain it to my mother. And like the idea of replacing a Lando Calrissian figure was so distant at the time. That's the earliest memory I can think of that really is about Star Wars. I know.
Wow,
that makes me very sad.
It does. It's just tragic. But, also, like, just as you point out now, I mean, I think, like, of course, everyone coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds may have had different experiences. But I feel like in those days, kids didn't get many toys at all compared to how many they get these days.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like, all of the kids that I know now, even if their parents aren't that well-to-do, have so many toys compared to what I had. And it's just amazing. I can't. I don't.
God, I'm not doing this because it's like I walked up to school in the snow both ways or whatever. But my favorite toy was my friend's gun that you put dirt in it and it shot dirt.
Dirt gun.
It was a dirt gun. So seriously, like that's what I played with. Were guns that you put. I don't even think it probably was meant to have dirt in it, but that's what we shot.
But how did it shoot the dirt? What was it meant to shoot if it wasn't meant to shoot dirt?
Maybe I don't know.
What kind of like how did it project?
You shoved dirt all in the end of it. I guess it was air. I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't remember. I just shoved dirt out of it a lot.
Well, but now Noah, your story reminded me of a Star Wars figure story from my life that so just before Return of the Jedi came out. similar to the Boba Fett thing, I guess there was a mail away for Admiral Akbar. But at that time, I had no idea who Admiral Akbar was, and I don't even think that any of the promotions I saw gave his name. But I was walking around in my neighborhood in one of the like vacant lots, and I found this guy just laying there, and I was like, oh my god, free Star Wars figure! And I knew he was Star Wars, but I checked to make sure. I was like, yes, Lucasfilm Limited on his leg. You know, this is a Star Wars figure, but because he is a creature and is kind of ugly looking, I assumed he was a villain. So I incorporated him into, you know, the rest of my playing with all of these characters, and he was this new villain I got to introduce. And then when I went to see the movie and he was one of the heroes, I was like, you've learned a lesson today, Macon.
Don't judge an Akbar by its cover.
Don't. It's true.
Well, any final thoughts on the wonderful world of toys before we move this episode along?
No, I think I've said all I need to.
Gun that shoots dirt. Let me know.
Well, for what it's worth, today, if you offered me a gun that shoots dirt or, you know, an Admiral Akbar figure, I would pick the gun that shoots dirt.
Curiosity, you might make even me do that, yeah.
All right. So what's next, Diamond?
You're next, Sisk.
I'm next.
The next thing we're going to talk about is Amanda Sisk has been reading a little bit about the nature of the Force and has some questions about the Force and precious few answers. And I think that although we have, over the course of our discussions so far, we've discussed the prequel trilogy and Solo. We still have all the other films ahead of us, and we have had many discussions, of course, you know, about the Force, and I'm sure we'll continue to. But it deserves a little of its own individual focus. So Amanda will kick this off with some of her recent readings and questions, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about possibly the most important aspect of the Star Wars mythology.
I am not nearly as prepared as Noah makes it out to be, but what was happening was, you know, I was thinking about the Force, I was wandering around, I was cleaning, I was talking to myself about the Force, and the conversation with myself ended with me laughing because what I said was, well, I really just don't understand the Force at all. So I started laughing, I was like, well, okay, Amanda. Okay. So let's talk about what this is. So there's a prophecy that someone's going to bring balance to the Force. Actually, let's go back a little bit further than that. The Force is energy. It's an energy that connects all of us, which means it's likely finite. It's not infinite. There is a finite amount of Force out there, it seems, to be used. I don't know.
I don't know if I agree with that, but go on.
That's one question. Is it finite or is it infinite? Because if it's energy, you can't create or destroy matter. So is it just like being pulled one way or the other? Because if there was enough Force, how could it possibly be unbalanced? Because you would have to have balance on this finite thing. So the second question is, we got to bring balance to the Force. We got this prophecy that is going to bring balance to the Force, right? How is the Force unbalanced? That's the question. So,
okay.
Right now, when we start the prequels, we got the light. You show the Jedi, and they're like, woohoo, because they have no idea the dark's up there. That's why they're so far down. Okay, but the Sith, Palpatine, they're like, shh, quiet, we're just going to hang out up here. And then Anakin comes, and he's standing right in the middle. So, does Anakin balance everything out? Or when Anakin goes over to the other side, does then the dark side come up? So basically, I think Anakin, the decision can be made that Anakin, or the argument can be made that Anakin came in to bring balance to the Force, and therefore he's got to stand right in the middle. And or go to the dark side in order to bring balance to the Force, because right now the Jedi are leading everything. So The real question, I guess, for me is, why do the Jedi keep talking about bringing balance to the Force when bringing balance to the Force really means having as much dark as light to me? And if they don't think there's any Sith out there and they don't think there's any real danger out there, then why do they keep saying they need to bring balance to the Force? It seems to me they're asking for something bad. And then why are they so surprised that Anakin's bad? I really don't understand the Force at all.
Well, I mean, I think that arguably the Jedi don't understand the Force at all either, in that sense. Because, I mean, I think that when that prophecy is mentioned, you know, I think it's in Attack of the Clones, when, you know, Yoda is like, a prophecy that misread could have been, you know. So I think that they're kind of, I think the idea we're supposed to get of the Jedi by the time we're in the prequel era is that they've just become so complacent, and they think that they're so great that they're not really achieving much of anything. They're not really very good at interpreting what the Force is or what the will of the Force is. They don't quite understand it as well anymore. And as Yoda says, they can't really see the Force the same way they used to. So I'm assuming that they kind of are thinking that bring balance to the Force means make us better able to understand the Force. But in the end, I think it ends up being something more along the lines of what you're saying, that, you know, by going and empowering the dark side, Anakin has brought more balance to the Force. But then
you could say that Luke so Anakin comes in and he goes, ooh, and then Luke comes in and kind of goes, ee, because he and Anakin kind of walk to the middle. I'm very visual.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think kind of what might be, because I mean, a lot of the, in the newer trilogy and a lot of the material with like Clone Wars and things that goes around that, there's a definite push towards the gray Jedi kind of thing.
The what?
So gray Jedi. So you've got, you know, Sith and Jedi, and then there's supposed to be like this, the gray in between is someone that is like not dark side or light side. They've kind of found a way to harmonize these things within themselves. And so and mythologically, that is where this story seemed to be going anyway, is that, you know, while it's really easy to look at the duality of light and dark and good versus evil, that's not the way the world works at all. And, you know, when you really come to understand the world better than you did as a child, you see all these gray areas. So I feel that that's kind of, you know, the Rey and Kylo dynamic of, you know, neither one of them is exactly good or evil. That it's a definite kind of yin yang with there's little good and a little bad here, and the way that they can kind of seem to get along seems to be heading more towards that. You know, maybe light side, dark side is part of our problem. If we're looking at things in such absolutes, we're not really going to be able to make any progress.
Only Siths talking absolutes.
I know many have interpreted the notion of balance in the Force to mean a sort of equal presence or equal influence of Jedi and Sith. But I've never been convinced that that's what's referred to by the phrase balance of the Force. And I think that the story told over the course of all these films it doesn't present Jedi and Sith or the dark side and the light side as two equally valid answers to the same question. It presents one as virtuous and heroic and the other as being absolutely evil. I completely agree, Marc-Anthony, that that's not the way the world is. And I think the Star Wars series at its best in the more morally ambiguous chapters like Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi challenges that and makes you see a little bit of the good and the bad and the bad and the good. But I don't know. Overall, the structure of the thing doesn't suggest to me that a balanced, sort of peaceful, harmonious world would involve equal parts.
Oh, I don't think it means a peaceful, harmonious world necessarily. But I think very definitely, while we're presented with people saying that the Jedi way is the virtuous and the better, I think that what happens ultimately shows that that's not the case.
Yes.
You know,
you're proud.
And that leads to hubris, and it ends up, you know, blinding you just as much as hate can, just in a different way. So, and, you know, also, you know, the whole, you know, like, had Anakin not been forced to leave his mother, had he not been forced to sublimate his feelings for Padme, if he hadn't been following all of these rules of the Jedi Order, he might not have been put in a position where he ultimately would do what he did.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, what about this? He's got these midichlorians like crazy. He was going to be brought into this no matter what. Like it's like when Ray says, there's something in me. It's always been there. It just woke up. I don't know what to do with it, and I need help. And I think that would have happened to him anyway because of the midichlorians.
Well, I mean, I think he would certainly have issues, but he wouldn't have been put in the position where Palpatine could manipulate him the way that he did.
Maybe.
Because it was basically about fear of losing things, and if those things weren't in such threat because of the ideals he was supposed to maintain. You know, and let's not forget that the Jedi wanted Luke to kill his father.
Yes.
You know, that was oh, just kill your dad and things will be fine.
Yeah, and Yoda urges Obi-Wan to kill Anakin very similarly.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, Luke does not choose either the dark side or the light side. Really,
right.
That's what they think is going to happen. You left too early. You're going to go there. You're not going to be able to kill him, or you're going to kill him, and so you get to choose dark side or the light side. And he ultimately chose the gray side. He said, you're there's a lot of messed up shit in you, but I'm going to fix it.
Right.
Which also, okay, so
this is exactly why
Hello? Oh no, Marc-Anthony?
Marc-Anthony? He's frozen in carbonite.
He is. Oh no.
What was that?
Ah.
Oh, here's another one. Okay.
Hey.
So sorry about that. I'm having computer problems, and I don't know what happened there, but
It's okay. You're awakening from the carbon freezing. Your eyesight will return in time.
I think this is a good time to ask this question.
True. Used to just see a black blur, now I see a big white blur.
Yeah.
Is this
okay.
Force hours to use? So, if we say the Force is this thing that's all around us and everything.
It's an energy field created by all living things.
Very good, Obi-Wan. And so, it's ours, but it's this thing that binds us all together and creates a symbiote relationship with all of us. Then is the Force ours to take and then throw a droid army across the room? Is that really something that we should be taking and using that Force for? We definitely should not be making a goddamn pear float across the room. Like Hans Christian Andersen said, he would be very upset with me. But like, yeah, because why are you using the Force for that? The Force is very important. And I don't know if we should even be allowed to use it. Wait, because I use it all the time. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, why do you think that you get to...
I mean, I guess, in this sense, it's sort of like, it seems like, you're looking at the Force in terms of, being a higher power in that sense. That it's sacred and therefore maybe we shouldn't touch it. But at least based on Obi-Wan, although we do know Obi-Wan is a big old liar, you're kind of supposed to be making manifest the will of the Force. So the Force being this, energy or this consciousness that connects all life has a desired outcome that it's kind of moving the chess pieces in order to make happen, which making a pear float across the room.
It is true.
The Force wanted that pear sliced and
You're breaking up again, but I know you're talking about
reason think this was, yeah.
What were you saying, Noah Diamond?
It is true that sometimes in the films and in conversations about the films, the Force is discussed as though it's a gift that people either have or don't have the Force. But it seems like the more sophisticated reading of it is yeah, the force is always there. It's more than a concept like God, and it's more like
It's Buddhism.
it's more of a it's more of a Buddhist idea, and the being force sensitive, as is sometimes said, or being strong with the force, has to do with just having the ability to harness the power that's already there. And although force strength does seem to run in families, it doesn't necessarily have this royal blood aspect to it. And the same way, there are people in the world who are able to develop abilities that not everybody has, by being super tuned into mysterious aspects of the human mind. That seems to be what we're talking about.
Well, what we could do at this point is say, this leads into, let's talk about historians.
Marc-Anthony, I'm afraid your connection is still not where it should be, and like you're freezing and breaking up a lot.
Jeez. I think it might be my internet. I'm sorry if that's the case.
No, nothing to apologize for, but I feel bad because you're undoubtedly making very good points, and we can only sort of get them.
See if there's anything I can do here.
I'll take this opportunity to let everyone know that they should really read, or it's a very good read, The Dharma of Star Wars, by Matthew Portolin, I think. Portolin, and it's very much a Buddhist text, much more of a Buddhist text than I thought it would be, but he talks about Qui-Gon more than anybody else, and about his first line about, being mindful of the present. It's very interesting. If you're interested in Dharma and all that, you should read this, because it's talking about, the Buddha, who was the original Jedi.
Right. Well, I mean, if I could jump in here, can you hear me? Am I breaking up still, or am I hearable?
Right now, I can hear you.
I think that Buddhism has to be the biggest influence on the Force, of the Force as seen in Star Wars, without question. But it's really just kind of like borrowing things here and there from Buddhism, and the Jedi philosophy isn't exactly Buddhism.
No.
But what it is almost exactly is, what was that?
The attachment leads to suffering. Very much.
Right. No, there are certain, tons of things are very, very Buddhist. But the concept of the Force itself is pretty much panpsychism. It's, the philosophy that all matter is really a projection of a connection of this, energy force that's interacting with itself. Is very panpsychic. But in terms of Buddhism, I think that the concept of it's sometimes called Mushin or Wu-Wei, and that being the idea of detachment from what you're doing, not really putting thought into the action. You're just performing the action and kind of letting it happen. This is often used with artists where you're not conscious allowing it to happen and just allowing your body and mind to produce this thing. And it's very similar to the way the Force is talked about in the films.
One interesting thing that George Lucas said was, and this is so applicable to so many things, in 1997 he said that the more detail he articulated about the Force and how it works, the more it took away from its core meaning. Which is absolutely the truth, and it's the same, the monster, once you see the monster in the scary movie, it's no longer scary. Once you explain what's going on in that weird house with all the ghosts, it's not scary anymore. Once you explain the Force, you start picking little holes in it, so I understand that, but I also feel like if it's, he also said there's a Force, and if you serve your selfish side, that's when you go to the dark. And if you serve your selfless side, that's your choice to go to the light. It's also a very interesting way of putting it. Because it doesn't mean you're like stuck in one place or the other, which ultimately Anakin swings back to the middle. And maybe he does bring balance to the Force. But I do want to talk about midichlorians.
Well, and it's
because what the hell? Why did this just show
it's a
up?
good way to look at it. All right. I'll do my best. And I don't want to be like the midichlorian apologist, but I kind of do. I mean, it's really a narrative thing that can very quickly and easily, without too much time being spent on exposition, explain where Anakin came from. So, his whole virgin birth thing, I mean, I think it's not ever said explicitly, but I think if you've seen the prequels enough times, you pretty much get that Palpatine created Anakin in order to be his next apprentice. And so he was getting the midichlorians to create an apprentice. And I am guessing that's going to come up in episode 9 again, too.
Yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it?
I think there's chance that Rey was a midichlorian creation of Palpatine's as well, or something to that effect.
It feels like
I realize that people hate the midichlorian thing, and I understand why they do, but it really just doesn't bother me as much as it does most people. I think I understand people saying it kind of takes away from the mysticism of the Force and tries to solidify it in a more scientific way. But I don't think I agree with that. I mean, I think it just steps to the process because it doesn't make it any more scientifically understandable, a way you can quantify how talented someone might be in the Force, because if they've got more midichlorians, they can more easily communicate with the Force. It's just adding another thing there. It doesn't really bother me that much.
What do you think Luke's midichlorian count is compared to Anakin's?
Never thought about that question. I assume it has to be a bit lower.
You would think so, but I don't know. Can you increase your midichlorians? Can you divide your cells more? I don't know.
Can you get a midichlorian infusion? Like if you...
Oh, yeah, they've got drinks.
They sell midichlorians.
Energy drinks and things.
Energy midichlorian. Liquid midichlorian.
Boost your midichlorians in just one drink.
Like the liquid Schwartz.
I do think that
they pour into the gas tank. Liquid Schwartz.
The joke doesn't even make sense.
No.
No.
I think we have to be more careful with the Force, is what I'm saying. I think throwing droids across the room isn't something we should use it for. But there's also another interesting thing that I just thought of, and Noah, I can't remember who said it. Was it Ryan Johnson? Ryan Johnson was running something past them and saying, I want this to be something they can do with the Force, and it's new. So can I do this? And they said, yeah, you can do that. And he pointed out, in every single movie, there's a new thing that the Force can do. Every single one. And of course, I read this today about 2 hours ago, so there's no way in hell I'm going through the movies to figure out what the new Force thing is. But that's very interesting that in each movie they can do something else. It's kind of like, R2-D2 can fly, spit oil, and set things on fire.
I think it seems true, though, and sort of self-evidently true. I'm sure Ryan Johnson was talking about Luke projecting himself into another location, in the climactic scene in The Last Jedi, because that's a Force skill we haven't seen before, for sure.
Not in the movie, anyway, although he did that a lot in the extra. That was Luke's thing.
Oh, no kidding.
And what?
That I did not know.
It was called Jedi Battle Meditation.
So in the expanded universe.
That was a different thing. Jedi Battle Meditation was, Luke had learned to kind of basically command armies from a distance, but the projecting oneself was also a thing that he had done, and the Jedi were known to do. But that was the first scene. So as a fan of all of that material growing up, I would see that in The Last Jedi. Especially the way that it was used, but we'll get to that movie more specifically when we get to it, I guess.
I'm sure there are many more examples, but in the first film, in A New Hope, Episode 4, I don't think anyone ever uses the Force to levitate an object. The
Well,
Force
no.
is...
Oh no, he choked the guy, but he didn't pick him up.
Yeah, there's Force choking. There's using it to control people's minds. These are not the droids you're looking for. Obi-Wan uses it to speak to Luke from the great beyond, but Luke doesn't see Obi-Wan as a Force ghost in A New Hope. The Force in that movie seems to mostly be just a source of sort of psychic power, increased ability to anticipate things, and shortened reaction time. Turn off your targeting computer and trust your instincts. That's how it's presented. And then, without contradicting that, Empire builds on it quite a bit by making Luke able to see Obi-Wan, communicate with him, and being able to make the lightsaber, come to his hand.
And also Vader can knock those things down.
Yeah.
He can just throw shit. I mean, there's a lot more movement with the Force there.
Also in Empire, we get the first sense that Luke and Leia can sort of communicate psychically with each other using the Force. And then in Return of the Jedi, Luke is a much more sophisticated Jedi at this point, and he's able to, I can't think of a specific Force skill we haven't seen before, but his mastery of the Force in the Jabba's palace sequence is considerable.
And we could also maybe assume he's using the Force when he's doing backflips on Jabba's sail barge, things like that.
When he jumps down and he grabs but that's D2, the R2-D2 throwing the saber at him. But
yeah. Right.
I couldn't do that, but it's
there are people that more or less can. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe they're used. And then, of course, they're in episode 1, the Force speed, which we never see again, and probably.
You're breaking up again.
When they run away from the. Am I still breaking up?
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay, you're back, I guess.
Oh, okay. So in The Phantom Menace, when they're escaping the droids, and they do the really quick zoom run away, we never. That's the only time we ever see that Force power used. And there are a lot of other times when it would have come in handy, you guys.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts on the Force. Basically, that I don't understand it, but that I'm kind of purist here in the fact that we should let it be part of us and we should be part of it because we all are and we're in this symbiote relationship. But I don't know if you should use it to throw droids across the room.
Well, I mean, what are you saying there? The Jedi shouldn't use the Force to defeat the droid army that the forces of evil are using to subjugate people and take over systems and planets?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that if we're looking at the Force, more or less as a metaphor for, listen to your heart and follow your gut and more to the point, it's a counterpoint to technology. I mean, that's really the major theme of Star Wars is how is humanity interacting with technology, and is it a good or a bad thing? I think that the answer is, well, it depends on how you interact with it, because you have good, helpful, friendly technology like R2 and 3PO, and then you have, so consumed with technology that he's barely human. And I think Luke switching off the targeting computer in deference to the Force is the best illustration of, you don't necessarily need this thing right now. You can do this on your own. So in terms of that, I think it's perfectly viable for Jedi to throw any technology they want across the room, especially if it's shit at them.
But I feel like that's a different situation. I feel like that's somebody, and they're using the Force in that they are giving back and forth, and they're just feeling. They're moving into the Force and feeling everything around them, and that's how he knows how to shoot. When to shoot those proton whatevers. I don't know. I think that's a different example than.
But I mean, more people were killed by that than droids getting thrown across the room.
Yeah. I don't know. I have not figured out the Force yet. I'm sorry, Marc-Anthony. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well,
I think maybe the Force. The Force is unfathomable and ineffable.
But see, that's why I want.
Force is weird, y'all. The Force is weird.
I'll tell you.
I tell you what.
Undoubtedly, we will continue to discuss the Force as it applies to the films still ahead of us in our discussion series. But perhaps for this evening, we will leave it there and move on to the next topic of the episode, which is something I'm very surprised we haven't done yet. This was your suggestion, Marc-Anthony, as we were trying to come up with mini themes for this installment. Ranking the Star Wars movies in order, not of how good they are, but of our favorites. Star Wars movies in order of preference is what we're talking about. So
Right.
Each of the three of us has given this surprisingly difficult question some thought, and let's go through our rankings and kick them around a little bit. Would you like to get the ball rolling, Amanda? I saw a crawl about to crawl up the
I'm
screen
going to go
here.
from my least favorite to first.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by my least favorite. It is Solo, A Star Wars Story. I dislike that movie very, very much. I think I've said enough about Solo in the series. I don't need to say anymore, but it's just a stupid effing movie.
Anyone curious about Amanda's detailed opinions, or all of our detailed opinions about Solo, watch Faces of Stone episode 6, in which we discuss it for an hour and a half.
Yeah. It was awful.
It was wonderful. It might be my favorite.
What's everybody?
Now it's getting good. All right, so Solo is your 10th favorite Star Wars movie. What's your 9th?
Oh, we're going on me?
Oh, do you want to do that? You want to go around and do our least favorites first? And
Maybe. I don't know. I just feel like I'm going to hog the whole thing. I can go. Phantom Menace.
No, hog the whole thing. Go.
do your whole list.
Yeah, do your whole list.
Well, I've got 11 because I added something in here that isn't technically a movie, but I wanted to show how much I hated Solo. Number 11, Solo. Number 10, The Phantom Menace. Number 9, The Christmas Special. Number 8, Attack of the Clones. Number 7, Revenge of the Sith. Number 6, The Force Awakens. Number 5, Return of the Jedi. Number 4, The Last Jedi. Number 3, A New Hope. Number 2, The Empire Strikes Back. Number 1, Rogue One.
Wow.
So what I think that the most controversial things here are going to be Rogue One, Empire's Over A New Hope, and Return of the Jedi doesn't end up until page 2.
Oh, you think it's controversial? Because I think most people like Empire best. I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah.
Now that you put Rogue One above that, I can see a lot of people being upset with that. But not that you like A New Hope less than.
What about The Last Jedi coming before Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, that's a bold move. I think if the original trilogy, if anything in the original trilogy doesn't break your top 4, that's a big deal.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can either argue about mine or we can hear yours.
Well, I don't want to argue too much, and I don't want to anticipate our next episode too much. Amanda's favorite of all the Star Wars films is Rogue One, which is significant. But our next episode is going to be an in-depth look at Rogue One. So right. I don't want you to say too much that is better said in the next episode, which you will be hosting.
Like that said, without going too deep into it, while I don't agree, I get it. Like, I think that's a perfectly valid favorite Star Wars movie.
I really respect that. I really respect the fact that Rogue One is your favorite.
It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but I have no major argument against that being yours or anyone's.
I had a really hard time saying it was for a long time. I walked out of that movie, and I think I turned to Noah and I said, I think that's my favorite Star Wars movie, and I can't ever tell anybody that. Because I was so nervous about the whole thing. And now I'm just like, no, it's really my favorite. I really, really, really love it.
No, that's great. You do you, Jinner. So Okay, Noah, what's your list?
This is how my list goes. My 10th. Now, I only have here the canonical films, but not the Clone Wars cartoon film, which I haven't seen. So mine is a list of 10. I didn't include the Christmas special or Hardware Wars or anything. In the last place, 10th, I also have Solo, a Star Wars story. I'm not as down on it as Amanda is. I don't dislike it intensely. And I feel a little bad putting it in a place on this list where I'm saying, like, it's the worst. But if I made a list of all the things I like about this film, Solo would have the shortest list of pros. So I do have Solo last, even though I don't hate it. Number 9, Phantom Menace. Number 8, Attack of the Clones. Number 7, Rogue One, which I'm sorry about. I really like Rogue One a lot.
Wow.
I don't have anything negative to say about Rogue One, as we will see in our next episode.
I do.
I think Rogue One is great. Yeah, you do. Now, I think Rogue One is terrific. However, it's being ranked against films that are embedded in my heart from childhood or that interact with those films. And so now we're getting to like a ranking of things that I love. I love without qualification, you know? And Rogue One, I'm afraid, does kind of, it falls 7th on my list. Number 6, The Force Awakens, which I also love, but not quite as much as I love my top 5. My top 5 are number 5, Revenge of the Sith. Number 4, The Last Jedi. Number 3, Return of the Jedi. Number 2, A New Hope. And number 1, Empire Strikes Back. I would love to have a contrarian opinion about this. And on recent rewatches of the films, I've looked for reasons not to think Empire is the best, because it's just trite at this point to rank Empire first. It's sort of universally recognized as the best of these films. And much to my dismay, I really think it is the best of these films.
We're actually not that different.
No, pretty close, especially the second half, the bottom part of our lists.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm sure the more I watch Empire, the less I like it. Or that's not true. That's not. It used to be my favorite for a long, long time, and in recent years, the more I've watched it, the more I've been like, oh, but this, I don't know. So I've had more reservations moving forward with that. But I too respect your opinion.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, very vociferously, I respect both of your opinions.
Thank you. So, what's your, I will say also that Rogue One is not, well, we'll talk about Rogue One. Actually, never mind.
Yeah, we'll I'm looking forward to talking about that one quite a lot, because that's one that my opinion has changed about significantly.
I get to
because
talk about,
yeah,
RISE of SKYWALKER.
There's a lot we can talk about with that one.
Yeah.
So we'll save it for that. All right, should I do my list now?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so number 10, The Force Awakens. Number 9, Rogue One.
Wow.
Now, as I said, every time I watch it, I do like it more. And I'm even looking at this list now thinking I've put it a little too far down, but I'm going to stand by it for now. And I should say, like, this list, any day you would ask me to make it would be different.
Yeah.
What? It's just depending on my mood that day, I'm going to have a different order. I mean, the first and last ones will probably be the same, but everything in between that might get bumped around depending on my mood that day. Number 8, A New Hope. Number 7, Soul. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of New Hope.
You're like blowing
there are things that,
You're blowing my mind.
I knew this would be interesting.
And I got a thing specifically to say about Star Wars and emotional things as soon as I get done with this list that I was talking to someone about the other night that I want to bring up. But number 7 is Solo. And I'm pretty comfortable with where that sits in this list, in that I really like it a lot. I find it a really enjoyable movie. But it's probably the one I'm gonna, if I'm like, I feel like watching a Star Wars movie today, it's probably gonna be low on the list of which ones I'm gonna watch. Number 6, Empire Strikes Back. Number 5, Revenge of the Sith. Thank you for helping me count. I just, numbers.
Man.
They're just, math is hard. 5 is Revenge of the Sith. 4 is The Phantom Menace. 3 is Jedi. 2 is Attack of the Clones. Or I'm sorry, Return of the Jedi, then Attack of the Clones, then the Christmas special is my second favorite. And my first favorite is The Last Jedi.
Wow.
And it is absolutely my favorite. Like, and so one of the reasons that The Last Jedi is my favorite, and I only kind of figured this out the other night. We had some friends over and we're talking about Star Wars, and well, actually, I'll go a little further back. Steve and I watched the new Amazon show, The Boys, which is, basically Mystery Men meets Watchmen. It's, very much a critique on Republican promotions and things like that. And afterwards, he was really crestfallen, and he was like, "Why aren't you upset?" I was just so emotionally affected by that, and I was like, "Well, I really enjoyed it, but when I think about it, I don't think I've ever had a genuine emotional reaction to any genre film. I think I have real emotional reactions to movies about real people in real situations, but as soon as you make it this hyperbolic fantasy kind of thing, I'm not responding to it in an emotional way, the way that I would to another story. So I can really get into it and really enjoy it and really have a lot of fun, but I'm not genuinely resonating with any of the characters. And The Last Jedi, I think, is the first Star Wars movie where I actually felt like I was having an emotional connection to what was going on. So for that reason, it's my favorite.
That's very interesting, and I knew your list would be iconoclastic and fun. I just want to note, and I do hear what you're saying, and I add the same disclaimer to my list that I reserve the right to change this order around any time. And if I had made the list on another day, it might have been a little different. But with that in mind, Marc-Anthony Macon considers all 3 of the prequels better than Empire Strikes Back. Is that right?
I mean, list? at least I would probably rather watch any of them than watch Empire Strikes Back. And when we get to Empire, we'll discuss it more in detail. But I mean, while I think that the Yoda stuff in that movie is magical, I can't read that. What is it?
Are you fucking slash insane?
I am. Thank you.
But that's for you.
I think that the Yoda stuff in Empire is brilliant and perfect and amazing. Other than that, it's just a big chase scene. There's not a lot else going on.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I was. I mean, when we get to Empire, we can talk about it in a lot more detail. But I feel like maybe. I don't know. People might respond to the style of Empire better or whatever, but I don't think the story is all that strong, and it doesn't do much for me. So yeah.
One of the things that I find interesting about this list is that, to me, Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi are so similar, and I love them for so many of the same reasons. I mean, I'm obviously responding to different aspects of Empire anyway than you are, in order to see such a connection between one of the top one on your list and one of the bottom ones. But it also, I must not be the only, that must be reasonably common, because of course The Last Jedi did get a negative reaction from at least some fans who probably do consider Empire the top of the list. So maybe I'm in a minority in seeing them as so similar.
No, I think they are very similar. I mean, I think that, you know, Empire certainly does for A New Hope what The Last Jedi does for The Force Awakens.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, I mean, they definitely are taking what they're building upon in a new direction, if not. But I think that, and it's not fair of me to project necessarily, but I think that a lot of the love of Empire is because it's cool. It's just cool. It doesn't have much silliness in it, and when it does, it's very pointed silliness. So, you know, Yoda is silly at first, but that's to illustrate a very specific point. It doesn't have as much of the just kind of wacky goofiness that you see. And also, it's probably the least colorful Star Wars movie. There aren't that many aliens.
Yoda kind of gets all the creature value in the movie. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Whereas, you know, Return of the Jedi is just like so populated with all of these wild creatures. It's, you know, and also I think that, well, whatever. We'll talk more about this when we get to Empire.
Alec Guinness is in one movie. Really? And you don't like it?
I like it, but it's not Bridge on the River Kwai. I mean,
well, no.
And also, like, you have to keep in mind that, like,
on the River Kwai.
Once I heard Lucas's first choice for Obi-Wan Kenobi was supposed to be Mifune Toshiro, I just want to see that version. You know, like, I love Alec Guinness, don't get me wrong, but if I could have you know, like a special edition of the original trilogy that had Toshiro Mifune as Kenobi.
We don't need another special edition. I'm not buying anything else.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yes, you have Solo above A New Hope on your list. That's
and again, it really isn't to say that I dislike A New Hope. It's really a matter of, if I'm going to watch a Star Wars movie tomorrow, which one am I most likely to watch? And I'm more likely to want to watch Solo than A New Hope right now.
I understand that. A New Hope is kind of like, can't you just close your eyes and watch it anytime you want to, because you know it so well. Well, those are our rankings. Maybe later in this series, as we get ever closer to our December 22nd final episode in which we discuss The Last Jedi, maybe at some point we'll revisit this question and see if any of our rankings have changed, or if we've influenced each other at all, or if this particular trip through the saga changes any of our opinions around. That will be interesting. But for the time being, maybe we'll leave our film rankings at that, and just move on to the final segment of the evening, which is just going to be a sort of a Force lightning round, as we landed on earlier. We have, in anticipation of this grab bag topical theme episode, we decided to come up with a few questions to ask each other, insights to coax from one another regarding Star Wars. So why don't we just go around and do a few of these before we call it a night? Amanda, do you have a place to begin?
I didn't come up with any questions for anybody.
All right. Would you like me to? Would you like me to ask you a question then?
Sure.
This is a question for both of you to answer. It's possible that Marc-Anthony has already answered this, but he can identify.
Do we need to buzz in or something?
No, it's a discussion. You answer first, and then you answer.
I want to buzz in.
Then by all means, buzz in. Yes, of course, buzz in, obviously. And be ready to buzz in, because you're not competing against anyone, and time is not a factor. So, all right, the question is, what is your most unpopular Star Wars opinion? Where do you most part from the mainstream of Star Wars thought?
I don't know. That Rogue One is my favorite one. That I love all those characters who are dead. Many of them more than I like characters who've gone through the entire thing.
All right. That's an answer.
Yeah, it's got to be that. I'm not really that contrarian, as we've said. I like it all.
I guess for me, like, because, certainly I have a lot of unpopular Star Wars opinions, like, the not lionizing Empire Strikes Back being a big one. But I guess in a more general sense, it's that I don't really approach Star Wars in terms of wanting it to be badass. I don't want to come out of it feeling like I just saw something that was really cool and awesome. I'm really partially in it, or a lot in it, for the goofiness and the goofiness and the awkwardness. So for me, it soars the most when it fumbles the most, in a sense. And then those are some of my favorite parts. So, like, I just smile so big anytime someone says sand. I'm just like, it gets everywhere.
Everywhere. Well,
Everywhere.
Unpopular opinion. I like Kylo Ren's hair.
Oh, how dare you!
Blasphemy.
It's been a blasphemy too.
What about you, Noah?
I think my most unpopular Star Wars opinion. I think my most unpopular Star Wars opinion has to do with being somewhat bored by the action sequences. The very sequences that many of the most enthusiastic fans talk about as the highlights are, for me, the parts that, they're kind of exciting the first time, but then you just want to get through the pod race or the chase scene or the epic battle. To me, those are the least interesting parts of these films. I think that's a fairly unpopular in terms of the way people receive the films. Another one that I think is unpopular, but it already requires a certain erudition, so that I think this is too rarefied an area to be my most unpopular opinion. But I feel that the importance to Star Wars of the power of myth and Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey is dramatically... bingo. I believe we've had a bingo. Joseph Campbell. I might have known. Yeah, I think Joseph Campbell's a very interesting thinker, and what he had to say about mythology is worthwhile. He was right about all that stuff. But I also feel that it's ridiculously overstated in an attempt to give Star Wars a kind of intellectual heft. And I do sort of start to roll my eyes whenever anyone starts to explain the importance of Star Wars by saying, I don't know if you've ever read any Joseph Campbell. I know. Campbell was right, but the very thing he was right about means that you don't have to be deliberate. You don't have to sit down and say, all right, I'm going to construct a hero's journey. It's like when people write musicals and they say, well, we have our opening number that introduces us to the characters, and then you have your I Want song. And, it's all true, but it's not true because it's a template to be followed. It's true because effective storytelling tends to fall into the same patterns. And I think George Lucas often tried to have it both ways. On one hand, it's just a kid's movie. It's just for fun, and whatever criticisms you might have of it must be because you're taking it too seriously. On the other hand, it has all the portent of human mythology, I guess it can be both of those things, but I don't know. I don't know. I think it really is both of those things. But I do agree with what you're saying. That I think that, and certainly I was one of these people in my teens. I was too. I really was.
Like because and it wasn't just our age at that point. It was also I think a lot of people now that weren't alive back then, especially. Don't recognize that, if you were a Star Wars fan, you really were in the minority then. It was maybe millions of people saw them, but a lot of those sales were the same people seeing that movie 6, 7, 8 times. So we were really openly mocked for caring about Star Wars at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that, for a lot of us, it was, as you say, a way to legitimize our interest in it. It was saying, yes, but there is this whole academic angle. And I think that's definitely there. And I think Star Wars is a beautiful example of how you can take, Campbell's heroic pattern and apply it to something modern. And especially considering that, we really didn't have any myths that addressed technology before Star Wars. That was something we really did need in our culture, and I think that's one of the major reasons that it really did resonate so strongly with people. But at the same time, not only is it just a kids movie, it's a especially stupid kids movie in a lot of ways. I mean, it really is, very cornball sci-fi, not in any way realistic, and just kind of, fantasy for fantasy's sake in that sense. So I think both of these things are there. But I do agree with you that it's kind of like a cop-out to be like, well, Mr. Campbell said.
Yeah, if only you'd read what I've read, then you would understand.
You'd like it. I do have a question for both of you. I just thought of. Who are you in the Star Wars universe? Like, who are you actually, and who would you like to be?
Oh, so wait, so like if we're being honest, which character are we the most like?
Yes, which character are you really? But which character would you want to be? It might be the same one. I don't know the answer either for myself.
It's a tough one.
Man, that is a tough one.
Probably the first gold or red person to die. Probably. I probably
gold or red?
Like I'm probably the gold
leader standing.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Probably that guy who goes all over me and he's got the beard and he's kind of fat. That's me. I'd probably die first.
No, you're the lady in the see-through pants in episode 2.
And who do you want to be?
Somebody who doesn't die first thing, but I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. Probably Obi-Wan. Or Kylo Ren. No, I don't want to be Kylo Ren. He's too sad.
Let's see.
I might be Rose.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, Rose wouldn't be a bad person to be.
I'm not Rey.
I was going to say maybe you're Rey.
No. I would like to be Rey. And I'm not Rey.
What about Jyn Erso in Rogue One?
I don't want to be Jyn Erso. I'm definitely more like Jyn Erso than I am like Rey. Anyway.
Without all the implications involved here, but I might be Watto. I feel like I kind of get grumpy when people mess with my stuff.
Jedi mind tricks don't work on you.
Right. And, I've got a belly full of helium so I can float.
I'm glad you don't do that here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm polite.
Is that why you're flapping your wings right now?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I'm a Toydarian. I guess if I was going to be any character, who I'd want to be, I think it would either be DJ, the what's his nuts from Last Jedi, the code breaker.
Oh yeah,
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro.
Yeah.
Oh.
Who I think should play Lenny Bruce. But anyway.
Yeah. Or I would maybe also Leia. I've always really kind of thought, especially, as she moved into being General Leia, I really kind of liked her calm and poise. I would like to be able to have that while knowing that she still has that snarky side to her. That would be awesome.
I'm afraid I see myself as Luke Skywalker, guys. I know that's the lamest answer, but yeah, I think so. I see myself as the hero of my story and as like a kind of, kid from a farm in the outer territories who wanted something big and went for it. Yeah, I can't get out of the Luke Skywalker thing from being a little kid and just identifying with the hero. Luke is kind of still that to me, even though it's funny, when I was a kid, I had a couple of close friends who were boys with blonde hair, and whenever we would play Star Wars, the blonde kid always got to be Luke, and I always had to be Han because I had brown hair. And So I was always Han. I even had like a vest, and I had pants that had a yellow stripe on the side. They just happened to, but they looked a little Han Solo-ish. And so I did my duty and, played Han when we would do that. But it's funny because Han is correctly seen as a far more interesting and charismatic and complicated character. He's also funny, which appeals to me a lot. Mark Hamill is a very funny guy, but Luke Skywalker is not funny. But anyway, it's Luke. I also kind of see myself as Obi-Wan because of my wisdom.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you see yourself as Luke, but is that who you want to be as well? You see yourself as Luke and you also would want to be Luke?
Maybe I see myself as Luke, but I would rather be Obi-Wan. Maybe that's what I'm saying.
Is there any part of you that would want to be Poe?
Poe? Maybe. I relate to the kind of thumbing your nose at authority part of Poe, although he's certainly not the first Star Wars character to have that quality. Why? Do you see me as Poe?
You seem to have a connection with Poe. Like when we watch it and when we talk about it, you seem to have a real connection.
Oh, that's
with
interesting.
That character.
Well, he is very funny. He has a lot of funny moments. I love in The Force Awakens his like, "You're going to talk first? Do I talk first? How does this work?" And I also in The Last Jedi, he's got a lot of good comic moments in that, including
the Hux.
Still waiting for Hux.
Yeah, that's
all right. I'll hold.
That is people hate. A lot of the fans are so fucking pissed off about that.
I know.
That's what
it makes them so mad.
It's what
I loved it.
I don't know. It's just art. When we get to The Last Jedi, I've got a lot of bile to spill about.
Well, all I'm saying is that's what Han Solo did when he was in the thing, and he was like,
exactly.
How are you?
I know.
Exactly. Anyway, it was longer. That's all it
right.
was.
And I really think funnier, but whatever. That's not the point.
That's my question. Thank you.
That's a good question. Okay. When is a time in your life when you feel like having the Star Wars movies kind of in your consciousness has really helped you?
Wow.
I think
mine is so silly. I don't know. Go ahead now.
You sure?
Yeah.
I think my answer to that has to do less with the content of the films and more with the sort of life's work of George Lucas. I think I'm more likely to think of the creation of Star Wars as a sort of inspiring story about creative vision and economic risk. And, this guy who had this idea that nobody else really thought was that good. And he nurtured this idea for years and years and talked about it to the point where people were like, yeah, what's George talking about? This space movie thing? It sounds awful. And even into the first movie being about to be released, he was kind of the only one who really believed in it. And look how right he was, Not only was it like a successful film, it changed the world. It changed film. It changed the way films are made and marketed. It was such a revolutionary work, and he was able to follow that up with worthy sequels and prequels that expanded this extremely idiosyncratic personal vision. And I've thought of that sometimes when I'm working on my own things. I think of George Lucas kind of envisioning an entire universe, an entire alternate universe in his brain. I find that personally more inspiring than any of the things that happen in the movies, because those things seem further divorced from my own experience. So that's a kind of non-answer to your question.
No, I think that's a great answer to the question.
Well, thank you.
I have realized that I want to change my answer of who I want to be.
Oh, okay.
I should have thought of this before. Chirrut Imlay.
Oh, yeah.
I went through a difficult time in my life, and I had a little playing card that had him on it, and it said, I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. And I carried it in my wallet. And every day I would look at it in the morning, and I would sit there and I would And when I had a hard time, I would walk down the street in New York City saying out loud, I am one with the Force and the Force is with me. I am one with the Force and the Force is with me. Everything is as it is because that is how the Force wills it. And it's basically I'm practicing Buddhism when I'm walking down the street. So that really, true Dimway comes to me all the time when I need him. Plus he's hilarious and he's just going to do it, you know? He's just going to do it.
I mean, he is definitely my favorite blind gay quasi-Jedi samurai.
He's great.
I would say my second one, which I was going to say was silly, but now that I've said that one, it's okay, is when I'm running and I get to a point where I don't want to run anymore, I have a, this is so weird. My dad is a Force ghost and he stands next to me and he tells me not to stop running. And he tells me you can run for one more minute, you can run for one more minute. And he looks like a Force ghost from the movies in my mind.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that really is.
He's really an asshole when I'm trying to run. Like, he won't let me stop. But
you have to be an asshole to get anyone to run when nothing is chasing them.
So, what about you, Marc-Anthony?
You know, I mean, I feel like especially in my youth, I think that Yoda's, you know, do or do not, or try not, do or do, you know, like there is no try thing. I can't even quote Yoda. That's ridiculous. But, you know, and, you know, but I think similar to what Noah was saying, I mean, it really was about, for me, you know, not listening to the plethora of critics that were surrounding me in terms of, you know, whether they were critiquing what I was, the way that I talked or what I was interested in or what I was creating or, you know, just innumerable teachers that were baffled by what I was presenting to them. And just having the will to do what I felt was the right thing to do, regardless of that kind of interference, was really a matter of Yoda just being like, you know, don't hesitate just because you think someone is going to critique, just do the thing.
That's a good freaking life lesson to learn. And
yeah.
From a puppet, that's even better.
Yes.
Much of what I know I learned from puppets.
Puppets are great teachers.
The frog is staying.
Yeah. All right. Well, any postscript, guys, before we bring this one in for a landing?
Again, no one said Cleveland.
No one did say.
God damn!
This is the second time no one said Cleveland.
Well, when we get to Howard the Duck, which is, you know, technically a Star Wars movie, we will. Well, okay, I'll just throw these out there just at the end. Who would you say are the sexiest Jedi and the sexiest Sith Lord?
Ah.
I love Darth Maul. I think he's hot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's hands down.
I mean, because it's not going to be Palpatine. It's not going to be Dooku. It's not going to be Hans Christian Andersen. And then who's the sexiest Jedi? Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Obi-Wan. Diamond?
I don't know if I have an answer here. I don't get a lot of sexual stimulation from Star Wars, I have to say.
Well, why are we even talking?
I love the movies. I love them with all my heart. But yeah, I mean, I other than a sort of childhood crush on Princess Leia, I mean, that I definitely felt. And and as an adult, of course, I have very powerful feelings about the woman in the see-through pants in episode 2. But neither of them is a Jedi or a Sith. Leia's not really a Jedi, although she is strong with the Force. I don't know if I have an answer to this. To me, Star Wars is not particularly sexy. I don't think that's a bad thing about it. It feels to me like a sort of, it's a kind of sterile world in some ways.
Are you saying Jabba the Hutt don't got it?
Oh, Sice Noodles is not a Jedi.
No, that's true.
Sice Noodles is an interesting character because you can tell that she would be sexy to the people to her fans.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, by the way, it's one of the reasons I would love to, I know it's probably not really up your alley, but I think under the right circumstances, you guys could have a lot of fun watching Clone Wars because the s02 stuff is great.
I am going to watch it at some point. But, I have to say, I have a blind spot here in general. I don't get a lot of sexual feelings about movies or television shows or the people in them. I'm very susceptible to sexual feelings in real life, but I don't have a lot of movie star crushes or like.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I mean, I guess it happens occasionally, but it seems like most people, it's a big thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
I fall in love with everybody on a screen that I see.
You do.
I do.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I get it sometimes, but it's rare, and I don't think it's as an intense feeling as it is for a lot of people.
If I watch a TV series, there's always at least one person in there that I'm going to carry for at least like 2 months. And I'm like, oh my God, this person, I love this person. And beautifully, Noah is like, okay, stop talking about generally Ryan Gosling. But, it's like, stop, okay, This,
wow. See, now I found that I will get crushes on characters that in no way carry over to the actor.
That's interesting too. Yeah.
That's it.
There are a lot of times where I think a character is, like I think Indiana Jones is sexy, but I don't think Harrison Ford is sexy. Actually, I don't really think Indiana Jones is sexy anymore. I did when I was 15, and
I did too.
Hormones were just like, ah!
Here's a hottie.
But he was a scientist and an adventurer. That's sexy.
It's sexy.
So on that note.
Well, we'll ponder this more, and as with our film rankings, we'll let you know if in a future episode we find ourselves thinking any Jedi or Sith are sexier than we thought on this particular day.
Right, we may change our minds.
I need Noah to say one thing that he didn't say. Both of you can say it actually, but Noah definitely needs to say it.
Oh, you won't get away this time, Dooku.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for bearing with us, folks, for this not live, but not edited episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. We will be back 2 weeks from tonight with an in-depth look at Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Hopefully, that episode will be live. We've got 2 weeks to figure out what to do in the absence of Google Hangouts broadcasting to YouTube. So if any of our legions of listeners and viewers know something about that, let us know what you're doing. In the meantime, we might as well tell you that our complete schedule and lots of information about us, including our archive of Star Wars discussions and Twin Peaks discussions, is available at facesofstone.space. And you can find us all over the various socials. But just to give you a sample of our identities, you can find us on Twitter, where Marc-Anthony is M_A_Macon. Amanda is President of Sisk, and I am Noah Diamond. We will see you next time, friends, for another exciting installment of Faces
of
of Stone.